I got my Teenage Engineering OP1 about 6 months after its official release. Now, I have to admit I was drawn to its unique yet strangely familiar design, as well as its unconventional approach to what a synthesizer is. So this means that I've had the Teenage Engineering OP1 for about 10 years now. So back in the 2010s, I think that the closest thing was probably the Electron stuff. More specifically, the Mono Machine, which had a roster of synth engines. Alright, that's enough reminiscing now. Let's dive into the core question. Has it lived up to the hype over the last decade? Cosmetics and durability. With the Teenage Engineering OP1, you have something that has been intentionally designed to hit that sweet spot between the Casio VL tone and a Bang & Olufsen accessory designed by Dieter Rams at his peak. Now, even 10 years later, there's no discernible flex or creaking or anything that makes me doubt the construction quality. Everything still feels tightly assembled to this day. All the keys, the knobs, and the ports on the unit work correctly. I don't feel that there's any significant extra give or wobbliness that has come with age. And that's a testament to the build quality of at least my unit. Also, the white finish has held up nicely. There's no inherent yellowing that I can discern, and any staining or any sort of buildup that you see is from me. Now, about the battery, which is generally a sort of a point of failure for many smart electronics nowadays, my OP1 still has its original internal battery. And like most other smart electronics, the battery capacity has diminished over time. However, I find that I can use the OP1 untethered for a few hours of cozy music making without feeling any range anxiety, so to speak. So that means that I feel I can get my music making done before it's time to charge it up. Now, occasionally, I might get a double press on the chromatic keys, but it's very infrequent. Likewise, with the knobs, there might be the rare occasion where one might skip a value, but it's nothing that worries me too much because it's not repeatable, so I'm not even sure if it's the unit or if it's just sort of a quirk of nature in that moment. The Teenage Engineering OP1 is definitely interesting when it comes to sound quality. In some ways, it's a synth that wears its lo-fi affectations on its sleeve, but other times it can also sound pretty clean. This is despite the limitations of its sound engine. So let me put it this way. Some of the OP1 synth engines can sound pretty clean on their own, but on the flip side, most of the effects on the OP1 lean into the lo-fi side of things. Now, it's easy to get dirty, but not so much the other way around. When you start mixing and overdubbing on the OP1 tape, the more you add, the more the sound quality will lose fidelity. For me, that is not a bad thing because I generally use the Teenage Engineering OP1 as a standalone tool for making music. And this is when I'm looking for portability foremost, not so much spotless sound quality. If you're wondering what the Teenage Engineering OP1 sounds like, well, you've been hearing it. The background music in this video was all made with the OP1. Now, if you want to hear more, I'll pop some links in the description. I have a bunch of videos, tutorials, sound demos, and full tracks, all made with the OP1. You can find those links in the description. Value for money. The cost of the OP1 is a sticking point for many people, and that is fully understandable. It's not cheap. When I got my Teenage Engineering OP1 about 10 years ago, it cost me around $850 US. Now, this was in 2010's money, so it wasn't cheap even back then. However, taking into account the use that I've gotten out of it, as well as the firmware updates that have added several new synth engines, and most recently the update that added audio over USB functionality, I personally feel it is good value for money for the price point that I bought it at. Now, this brings us to the current price of the OP1, which is much higher than what it was when it originally came out in 2011. And this is because a few years ago, in 2018 I think, there was a parts shortage, which meant that Teenage Engineering had to stop making the OP1, and that basically drove prices up in the secondary market. And then a year later, basically in 2019 I think, they were able to start production again, but when they offered it up for sale, they did so at a much higher price point, which is a little bit strange considering that it's still the same unit. There is nothing different between the pre-shortage OP1s like my one, and the post-shortage OP1s that are now available. Let's try to place the OP1 in the current synth landscape, because while when it came out it was very unique, it is worth noting that most manufacturers have been taking notes since then. And while there isn't necessarily anything that is a direct one-to-one competitor to the OP1, there are several compelling alternatives that tick most of the boxes of what the OP1 offers. Not only that, but some of these compelling alternatives are either at the same price point, the same original price point of when the OP1 came out, or in many cases, noticeably lower. Conclusion. I think that the OP1 has aged very well over the past decade. It's an idiosyncratic synth in terms of sound and design, there's no doubt about it. At the same time, I'm happy to say, at least for me, its build quality has not let me down, and I plan to keep on using it for as long as I can.
Not so easy to let go, not so easy.